Hi, I'm Lisa Bardot, and today we're going to be drawing a fun little grouping of some loaves of fresh baked breads. This is a great tutorial for beginners. It gets you familiar with using layers and alpha lock and clipping mask, which are three of the most useful features in Procreate. Plus, I'm going to show you how you can draw with the selection tool and create a beautiful texture in your work using a dry brush technique and some other fun texture brushes. For this tutorial, I'll be using brushes from my basic toolkit, my dry brush paint box, and my Texturific shaders. You can follow along with me if you have those brushes or use whatever you have on hand. And if you're new to Procreate, I recommend watching my Procreate for Beginners tutorial to get you familiar with all the basics. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any future tutorials. Let's get started. We'll begin by creating a new canvas. Tap the plus sign in the upper right, and the canvas size I'm going to be using today is 3800 by 2800 pixels. We'll start this piece off with a sketch, so you can choose your favorite sketching pencil. I'm going to be using sketching pencil from the Bardot brush pencil box set. And then for my color, I'm just going to choose black. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of my brush a little bit because I want to lightly kind of lay out where the different loaves of bread are going to be in this composition. So I'm just going to start by using basically like circles and rectangles to kind of lay out where these are going to go. So I'll do kind of like a circle here. We'll do a rectangle there. Another rectangle here. And then I'm going to do kind of two smaller pieces there. And then another sort of rectangular bread right there. So now that I've got some basic shapes to kind of like lay everything out, I'm going to bump the opacity of my brush all the way back out and start sketching in the actual loaves of bread. So I'll start with this baguette. It's kind of a long rounded rectangle like that. And this one is going to be a round loaf of bread. So I'll just draw a circle. And this one's going to be kind of like a rounded rectangular sort of shape. This one is going to be more of an kind of oval shape. You can look at loaves of bread to kind of get ideas for the types of shapes that you can do. But mostly they're kind of like round, either rectangles or circles. So, and then for these two, we're going to be doing something a little fun. We're going to have a pretzel and a croissant. So I'm going to zoom in and do the croissant, which is just going to be kind of like a curve like that. And then I'll draw like two curved edges and then kind of curve it in sort of like that to make a croissant shape. And then for the pretzel, this one's probably the trickiest of the bunch. So for the pretzel, I like to just draw it as one big line. So I start over here, I go across, and then I twist around. There's the one side of the pretzel. Then I come back around and then cross over and then back down like that. And once I've drawn as a line, I come back and I sort of like just make it thicker. So I just kind of draw a parallel line going all the way around like that. So that's my pretzel, and I'll probably just make it a little bit smaller. You can always adjust things in this sketching phase of the drawing. So I'm going to add a little bit more details to like everything else. So I'll start with my croissant and just draw some kind of like diagonal lines like that to represent the different sections of my croissant. And then I like to kind of just make it a little taller like this to kind of show the different little pieces. So I'm just drawing lines out and down, out and down. So now my croissant has a little bit more shape. And now for all these breads, I'm going to draw little designs in them. So I'll start with my baguette, and I'm going to do just kind of these, almost like a leaf shape, a bunch of these little leaf shapes all down my baguette. For this one, we're going to do kind of like a cross. So I'm going to draw a leaf shape this way, and then this way, perpendicular. So that one's that. For this one, I'll also do kind of some leaf shapes, but I'll make them a little bit bigger, like wider, sort of like that. And then we'll do this bread up here, and this one's going to be kind of like crosses, but they're going to be a little bit curved, like a little, like a hash mark kind of, a crosshatch. There we go. That's what I'm thinking. So I'm going to draw curved, kind of parallel lines. I'm going to do 3 of them. So there's 1 line, 2 lines, and now there's the third. And then I'm going to draw perpendicular kind of curving lines going the other way. So I'll draw one going that way One going there, and then one here. So there's that bread. And then this last bread, I wanted to do kind of like a really pretty, I don't know, like a little vine sort of design. So I'm gonna just draw more leaf shapes like this, but they're gonna be kind of going down in a line like this. So there we go. Okay. So now we've got all of our bread sketched out, and if you wanted to rearrange things before we move on to color, now is a good time. So you can always grab your selection tool and just draw a selection around one of the breads, go to your transform tool and then just like resize it or rotate it. You just kind of want to get everything in its final position. I'm gonna move my little pretzel over a little bit. And then I might make this baguette a little taller. So I'm gonna go to my transform tool and then I'm gonna switch over to freeform, and that'll allow me to stretch it like non-uniformly. So if I wanted to make it taller, I could drag it like that, and then I could grab the side and make it thinner. So if you ever need to kind of change the proportions of something, you could do it that way. All right, so this is looking pretty good, and I am now ready to move on to color. So I'm gonna go up to my layers, and I'm gonna create a new layer by tapping the plus sign. And I'm gonna move this layer below my sketch layer, just tap, hold, and drag it underneath. And I'm gonna go ahead and just set my background color right off the bat. So I'm gonna tap background color, and I'm gonna be doing sort of a kind of like bluish green color, so about right there, but something that's really dark and saturated. You can kind of play around with the hue by moving it that way, but something like this. And then I'm going to go back to my layers and reduce the opacity of my sketch so that it's just barely visible. So I'll put it about right there. I'm at 27%. So now I'm going to choose a brush to draw all the shapes of the bread. I am going to be using a brush from my basic toolkit called Basic Smooth, but any smooth edge brush will work well for this technique. So I'm going to choose Basic Smooth, and then I'm going to select a color, and I'm just thinking of the color kind of dough right now, like before it's cooked. So I'm over in my like yellowish orange and just like a really light color to start things out. And now we are ready to start tracing over the areas of our sketch. My brush size is set to 50%, and I'm going to start with my baguette, and all I'm going to do is just kind of trace over my sketch to create my baguette shape. And then once I have a completely closed shape, I'll fill it in with color drop. And then I'm just going to go around and do that for all my breads. So this round loaf here, we'll fill that in, this kind of oblong shape. Fill that one in. Fill that one in, and I'll come back to my pretzel and my croissant because they're the least simple of these bread shapes. Okay. All right, so I'll do the croissant first, and I'm basically gonna just trace over these little sections like this, and then go around, and then just kind of trace over that. And then once I have it a closed shape, I can fill that in as well. And then for the pretzel. So for the pretzel, if I have like a big round brush like this one, I'll just make the brush size as big as possible. And then I'll trace over my sketch. And if it's a thick enough brush, you don't even really have to go over it a second time to like make the pretzel thicker. But if you do want to make it thicker, you could always like go alongside the line you just drew and kind of thicken it up. It's kind of just up to your preference, like how thick you want your pretzel to be. I think that looks pretty good. So I've drawn all my bread shapes. Now I'm going to draw these little kind of details that are inside the breads. So for that, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to tap the layers and then tap the plus sign to create a new layer above the layer I was just on. And I'm going to set this layer to be a clipping mask. This means whatever I draw on this layer will only appear inside the shapes I've already drawn, which will mostly apply to this one and this one. But to do that, you tap the layer, and in this menu, you choose clipping mask, and you'll see a little arrow come down pointing at the layer right below. And then for my color, I want something lighter than my background. Just for now, we're going to adjust all these colors in a bit. So I'm just going to choose a pure white value. I double tap close to white and it will snap to a pure light white value. And so for these little inside pieces, we could draw them like we did the others, but since they're such angular kind of shapes, I'm actually going to draw them using the selection tool. So I'm going to go ahead and tap the selection tool here, and I'll start here with my baguette. And I'm just going to basically tap, tap, tap to create this shape. So I'm just going to tap a few times and then come back down and then tap on this little dot, the little gray dot, to close the selection. And then the other thing that I'm going to do to make this whole process go a lot faster is I'm going to tap down here where it says color fill so that it's highlighted. And you can see when I do that, it fills my selection with white, which is the color I have selected in the color picker. And if I go down here to the next one, I can just start tapping. And then when I hit that little dot again, it'll close the selection and fill that with color. And then I can just keep going and fill in these shapes. And as you can see, like they're not perfectly round, they're very angular. And that's like a style thing. I just like the way that it looks. So if you want to do it this way, you can, or if you don't want to just draw the shapes, you can as well. So I've done all my little baguette shapes. Now I'm going to do this round one here. So I'm just going to tap, 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 come down, and I'm basically just like tap tracing over my sketch lines. And then close the selection. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think the more messy it is, the better. Let's do this one here. So for this one, I'm going to basically be kind of like drawing these stripes or these like lines. So I'm going to tap over my sketch lines. I'm going to go past where the edge of my red shape is, and then I'm going to come back. So I'm kind of making this really long, rounded rectangle. So I'll do the next one. I'm just going to tap to make my next stripe, and then this one here. Okay, and now that I've done those three, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to do the ones that go the other direction. And then one more. Okay, I've done all those stripes. Let's go and do this one down here, just like the baguette. Just gonna basically tap trace over this line. And then I'll do this one here. And I'll come back to these guys at the end. I'm gonna do this one. So I'm just gonna tap over all these kind of leaf shapes to create my final shapes. And this can go pretty quickly because again, it doesn't have to be perfect. The less taps you do, the more angular these shapes will be. And the more taps you do, kind of the more of a curve you'll get. Like if I did a lot of taps on this one, my line would be a lot more curved. But I like it angular, so just do it to your preference. And I'm not even super sticking very closely to my sketch. I'm kind of making my shapes even more pointy than I had in my original sketch, but that's all right. It's just what I want it to look like. Okay, and then let's do our croissant here, and we're gonna do it in a similar way that we did this kind of like crosshatch bread. I'm sure all these like styles of breads have names, but you know, I don't know them. I'm not a baker. Okay, so I'm just gonna add sort of like a line right below each of these like little croissant sections. So just drawing these kind of rectangular sort of shapes with the selection tool. Again, not making them super perfect. Okay, so there is my croissant. And then for the pretzel, I'm actually not going to add any detailed lines for that one. Just going to leave it as it is. All right, so now I've tapped out with the selection tool to get out of selection mode, and I have all my little pieces done, and I'm ready to go ahead and turn off my sketch at this point. So I'm gonna go up to my layers, and I'm just gonna uncheck the checkbox for layer 1, which was my sketch layer. And there we're starting to see all the shapes and the little details of our bread. And now we get to do the really fun part, which is to add more color and texture. So we're going to be using some dry brush texture to add the coloration to all of our different breads. But first we need to turn on alpha lock on all of our layers. So we're going to go up to our layers panel and we're going to turn on alpha lock by, you can either take 2 fingers and you can swipe to the right on a layer, or you can tap the layer and choose alpha lock from the menu here. Just want to make sure you see like a checkerboard pattern in the layer thumbnail. And what this does is it locks the shape that we've drawn so we can only draw inside that shape. And I want you to tap to the layer with the bread shapes. For me, it's layer 2, but it's the bottommost layer. So tap on that one. We're going to start with our actual bread shapes and adding color to those. And then for our brushes, you can use any brush that has a really like dry brush kind of texture, but I'm going to be using brushes from my dry brush paint box. And I'm going to start with this brush called Dry Wide Streaker. So if you have this set, go ahead and choose Dry Wide Streaker. And now we get to choose some colors. All the colors that we're going to be using for our bread are going to be shades of brown. So kind of in the oranges, yellows, even kind of pushing into the red with different like values of those colors. So I'm going to start with this kind of like doughy color that I started with for my shapes. And I'm just going to sample that. And then I'm going to go up to the color picker and I'm going to get a color that's a little bit more saturated. So I'm just going to go that way and start by layering that color on a little bit. I think that looks really good. Here, I'll zoom in so you can really see what I'm doing here. I'm going to get an even kind of more saturated color going that way, a little bit darker, and layering that on. And you can kind of play around with like the different like tones that you add, the different hues, but everything's going to be kind of like, oop, that's probably a little too saturated. So I'm going to go back. Everything's going to be really in the kind of yellows and oranges. All right, I'm liking the way that that is looking for that piece of bread. So I'm going to move on to this one. So I'm going to just start with my kind of base color. And this is going to be a much darker loaf. So I'm already going to go like kind of choose a dark color. And then I'm going to do kind of like a swirl. Like imagine that's the texture of the bread, like since it's round. So I'm going to start with a kind of a darker color and then I'm going to layer on even darker. So I'm going closer into the red and then a little darker and more saturated. I might go a little bit darker than that. So this part you can have fun with and choose the colors that you want for your bread. I think this one looks good. And then I'm going to choose this one now. I'll just start with that base color and just start choosing some colors. Like that one looks pretty cool, but I think I want to go more brown, like it's a rye, I guess. I don't know bread, you guys. But I kind of want like a dark, really dark loaf for this one. So I'll start with that. And then you can always come back and like add more colors to it. So I'm going to do this one down here. Just choosing some nice kind of brown colors. For this one, I'm doing like a diagonal kind of marks across. This one, I didn't say it, but I did like a kind of like a cross back and forth to kind of mimic the lines in that one. You could make your lines go any direction, but I kind of like them to match like the shape of these, but you could do anything you want. I'll do that. Maybe get something a little oranger. Oh yeah, I like that color. So I think that looks good for that one. I'm going to do this one up here. Maybe a little oranger. For this one, I think it would be cool to do like lines that kind of go out, kind of like this. Whew. I don't know how to describe it, but other than, I don't know, like wheat or something, but they're kind of like merging outwards like that. So I thought that would look nice because that's kind of what these shapes do. So I'll start with that. And this one's, I really like this texture. So I'll kind of do like a little base of color and then add a little bit darker oranger strokes. The more contrast there is between the colors you layer, kind of the more you'll see that texture. But I really like the way that is looking. And then let's do our pretzel and our croissant. I'll start with the croissant. I'm just going to use this same color. I think that works good. So I'll just kind of layer on some strokes there. And then I'm going to get some redder, kind of darker. I'm getting pretty dark here, but I think it'll work. And then just kind of layer that on a little bit. I think I could probably go even darker, the underside of this croissant. And I didn't go all the way across, so I kind of left kind of this lighter color on top and then it's darker underneath, which I think looks pretty cool. And then our pretzel. So you kind of want to look at like pretzel colors. I'm doing like a swirl for this one for the texture of it because it's kind of like a swirly shape. So I'm just doing like a swirl, and then I'm going to get like dark, kind of like a reddish pretzel-y color like that. Actually, I probably could go more saturated than that. Redder, more saturated. Yeah, like a pretzel color. Okay. So now we can zoom out and start to take a look, and you can, decide if you want to adjust anything. Like if I wanted to make this a little lighter, I could do that. I want that like a really light loaf, because you could keep working this and kind of make it look however you want. Maybe I'll lighten this one up a little bit. Kind of like to have a variety of kind of darkness and lightness in the whole piece. That's looking pretty good. All right, so next I'm going to do the little like cut marks on all of these breads. So I'm going to go up to my layers. I'm going to choose the layer with all those little selection tool cut marks that we made. I already have Alpha Lock turned on that layer. So I'm just going to start by choosing a really light color and then just coloring those in a little bit. I want them to still be pretty light, but I'm also going to layer in some like the dry brush texture by choosing a slightly darker color. So it might help to choose the lighter color and kind of go over all of these lines or these shapes in one go and then come back and kind of make them darker. And my dry brush is kind of, again, going in that same direction for a lot of these. So these will all kind of go this way and then this way. And then I'm going to get some darker colors, and wherever I think I need it, just kind of darken some of these a little bit. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. I don't need to do a lot to these kind of like inside pieces, but I am gonna add one little finishing touch to this, especially because I know this little pretzel is incomplete without some salt, and I wanna add even more texture to this entire piece. So I'm gonna go up to my layers. I'm gonna create a layer in between these two layers. So I'll tap the bottom layer with the one with the bread shapes, tap the plus sign, that'll create a layer right above it, so it's in between these other two layers. And then I'm going to go to a different brush set now. I have this brush set called Texturific Shaders, which has all these really fun texture kind of shading brushes. But there's this one called Salt Shader, which is perfect for creating some salt on my pretzel as well as some texture to these other breads. So I'm going to choose the Salt Shader from my Texturific Shader set. And then I'm going to choose a pure white value for salt. So I'm going to double tap close to white to choose pure white. And then I'll zoom in here. My brush size is set to about 5%. And then I'm just gonna add some salt texture to my pretzel like that. However much salt you just think that it needs, you can add salt to your pretzel. And then I'm also gonna use this same brush just to add a little bit of texture to some of my other breads, just because I like the way that it looks. So I'll start with this one, and maybe I'll just sample one of the colors in here. And I just want like a darker color than kind of what's on here, and just add some little speckles here and there, like that. You can also layer on like lighter colors. If you wanted to add like speckles and kind of a lighter color, you could do that. I think on this one, I'll add some dark speckles. So again, I'm going to sample kind of this dark color I already have, and then just choose like a darker, more saturated color and just paint some little speckles on with this same brush like that. For this one, I'm gonna add some lighter speckles. So we'll go up here in the yellows, almost like it's, I don't know, seeds or grain or something on this bread. Could kind of layer in different colors, like that one's a little bit lighter than the one I just did. And maybe we'll do some over here. Get some lighter colors. Oops, even lighter than that. Just kind of play with that. Maybe I'll do some lighter on top, and then I'll do some like darker colors down here at the bottom. Yeah, I like that. I really like that. I kind of like mixed a bunch of colors, and I think that looks really cool. And then let's see. Maybe even on our little baguette, we can add a few speckles. A little bit dark colors. Nice. Okay. And now that I've added my speckly texture, this composition of loaves of bread is all done. I really love this piece, especially the dry brush texture. I really think that's what makes it for me. And it's actually a really fast and easy way to kind of fill a shape with color while making it look really cool and textured. And I just love it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun creating these fun loaves of bread in Procreate. This tutorial was inspired by a prompt from Making Art Every Day, a series of daily drawing prompts, tutorials, and motivation to help you nurture your creative practice. Every month we pick a theme, and for January, our theme is food. And this was a prompt from our bakery week. You'll find our full prompt list and related tutorials at makingarteveryday.com. Again, I'm Lisa Bardot, and I help people find their creativity through drawing on the iPad. If you'd like to support what I do, you can check out my premium brush sets that inspire creativity, including the ones we used in this tutorial at bardotbrush.com. And if you want to take your learning to the next level, you should join Art Makers Club. Art Makers Club is a joy-filled creative community and learning hub for digital art makers. As a member, you'll get access to a growing library of in-depth courses, live virtual events and tutorials, free Procreate brushes, and more. In our community clubhouse, you get to connect with like-minded learning artists, share your work, ask for feedback, participate in discussions, and so much more. Come join us in the club. You can learn more at artmakersclub.com. Sharing your work on Instagram? I would love to see it. Use the hashtag #BardotBrush. And if you're drawing the Making Art Everyday prompts, use the hashtag #MakingArtEveryday. Thanks, and happy art making! If you like this video, please subscribe for more awesome tutorials. And check out one of my other videos. Have a great day!